A lot of people have asked me why I do what I do. To be honest, I can't really explain it. It has just always been a part of me. While I can't explain why, I can only tell my story. This is my true confession, and it is nice to be able to say what cannot be spoken. I have to admit I have had this fantasy and deep desire to be a bride since I was little. I'm dying to tell my story. Confession helps bear the secret. Growing up, secretly I loved seeing fashion magazines for women. This was especially true for weddings and bridal magazines. I absolutely loved seeing how pretty all the girls looked in the truly beautiful and gorgeous wedding gowns. Oh, how I wanted to be one of them, to know how it felt to be a beautiful girl on her most special day, to be a princess. But I had to keep quiet and never admit my thoughts. I know I was not supposed to think that way. Boys are not supposed to be brides. Every wedding I attended, I'd watch the bride to see what she wore and wonder how she felt. What dress did she pick? Why did she select it? How did it fit her body? What did she wear under her dress? How did it make her feel? Oh, how I wanted to be her, to take her place as the bride, the center of attention. As I got older, I'd take the opportunity to greet brides at weddings, give them a hug, or even if lucky, dance with them so I could see the dress up close and feel the dress on her body, all the while wondering how she must feel to wear something so pretty and wondering what she might be wearing under her dress. Then one day I found out my older sister was getting married. I love my older sister dearly, but at the same time, after hearing the news, I hated her. I was so jealous of her. I pretended to be happy for her, but at the same time I was jealous because she was going to be the bride I wanted to be. My sister and my mother got to go through all the steps that girls get to do: plan the wedding, choose colors, and shop for a wedding dress and shoes, and though it was never spoken, they also selected my older sister's bridal lingerie, the foundation of everything that she would wear that day, to make her wedding dress completely flatter her feminine figure and make her the princess I so desperately wanted to be. I had secretly dreamed of being a bride since I was little, and now my sister was going to live my dream. I pretended to be uninterested. But inside I was dying, filled with envy and jealousy. And they kept much of it quiet from me, nor did I ask. I suppose they believed that a boy could care less about white dresses, lace, and such. But they did not know my secret thoughts and desires, nor did I let on this dark secret. The hardest part was they did not let many people see the dress she selected for her wedding day. It was to be a surprise until the ceremony. I did not get to see the dress she would walk down the church aisle in until the day of her wedding. Then, just a few days before her wedding, I was given an opportunity that made me stop and dream again, wondering how lucky I might be. On her wedding day, I greeted her as she got her day started. She had a full day of getting her makeup done and get all ready for her special day. I would not see her until later that afternoon. Then it was time. I caught a quick glimpse of her when she arrived at the church. I took my place before the ceremony. Of course, everyone who attends a wedding is all dressed up in honor of the wedding party. All the women and girls are in their dresses. But as anyone knows, no one can compete with the bride in her beautiful white wedding dress. As the music started and the doors opened, there she was, my older sister. But not only was she the older sister I had known and grown up with, who I loved, but she was the bride who I was so jealous of. She was the princess that day, and I hated her for it. Her wedding dress was beautiful. The white off-the-shoulder dress was soft satin, feminine, and had nice touches of lace and beads. As she walked down the church aisle that day, all eyes were on her, including mine. My eyes burned with envy as I kept wishing it was me walking down that church aisle in that gorgeous dress. I could only imagine what it must have felt like to be her, with the center of attention on her, with her pretty dress on, and at the same time also imagining what pretty lacy things she had on under her dress. I have always had this thought that when a beautiful bride walks down the aisle, all the women and girls wish they were as pretty as her, and all the men wish they could have with her. I, on the other hand, as her little brother, wished I was her. The ceremony ended and we were on to the reception, which was at a fancy hotel ballroom. She would have her reception there and then spend her wedding night there at the hotel before leaving on the honeymoon to Europe the next day. All through the reception I wanted to be with my sister. I wanted to be close to her, see her, and watch her. I wanted to be around her, to see her in her wedding dress and experience her wedding. I danced with my older sister at her wedding and held her close to touch the dress, feel its femininity, and feel how it felt and fit her body. I wanted to know as much about her as a bride as I could. At her garter toss ceremony, she lifted her dress just enough that I could see the lace tops of her bridal stockings. It was not enough to see her bridal lingerie, but it was enough to see under her dress and get a hint of her lacy femininity. As her garter was tossed, I fought hard to get it, and I did. Her garter was mine. Little did people who congratulated me know it was not about me being the next one to get married as the groom. No, it was about me having something the bride wore on her wedding day so I could have something of my very own. I excused myself and went to a restroom stall and slipped her garter on my leg and wore it under my clothes the rest of her ceremony. It was such a simple joy and extreme pleasure to know in that wedding celebration I finally had a garter on too. It was the same one the bride had worn. I could be just like her. As the reception ended and we left the hotel, my sister stayed, of course. And as my sister had her wedding night that evening, I slept with her bridal garter on that night. It was as close as I had ever come. The next day we all returned to the hotel to see my sister and get her off to the airport for her honeymoon. I could only imagine what kind of night she must have had. But at the same time, I kept hoping the opportunity one mentioned earlier would play itself out. My older sister was off on the way to the airport for her honeymoon, and they asked me to take care of a few things for her while my parents took them to the airport to catch their flight. I was supposed to take all the wedding gifts and flowers back to her house, which they would deal with upon their return. As a good little brother, I did as was asked and put all her gifts and such in the car. She said to just leave them in the living room. Then finally my dream came true. The last things she gave me were 2 bags. The big garment bag was obvious. It was her wedding dress. It was all wrapped up in the plastic bag, but I trembled as I held it, knowing what it was. She thought nothing of it. After all, the dark secret, desire, and jealousy of mine were unknown. To her and all around, it was natural, and I was her innocent little brother. She was off on her honeymoon, and who else would she trust to house sit while she was away than someone in her family she loved? To her and everyone else, I was to take things back to the house and look after the house to make sure everything was okay. I was only too happy and honored to do as I was asked. I took both bags and put them in the car. Then I kissed her goodbye. She was gone. I did as I was told and took my time, even though I was so excited and nervous. I got to her house and unloaded her wedding presents to her living room just as she had asked. Finally, I got to the 2 bags she had given me. I put the small overnight bag on her bed and took the large garment bag to her closet. I hung it up and then opened it for the first time. There it was! It was her wedding dress. It was the same one she wore, the same one I had touched on her body. She had been walking down the church aisle in the very same dress not 24 hours earlier. It was the dress I should have worn as the bride I had dreamed of being for so long. I just felt it and admired it for a few minutes. I caressed its soft femininity. Then I went to her bed to the other bag. I hoped my wishes were correct. I opened her smaller bag. And inside, there it was. It was her bridal lingerie. It was everything she wore under her dress on her wedding day. My sister was so trusting. It was so obvious she has never known my dark secret thoughts and desires. She never even thought I would be curious or want to take a peek at what I had been given. She presumed I would leave everything in her room at her house and just enjoy the time watching sports and such on her TV. She thought I would do as I was asked and take everything to her house, drop the gifts in the living room and put her bags in her bedroom, close the door, and spend my time in the guest room. She could not have known what a wedding gift she had just given me. I was so overwhelmed with excitement. But I wanted to do it right. I wanted to be the bride I had dreamed of. So I went to her bathroom and got ready. I took a bath like I imagined she did. I used her things. I sat at her vanity and applied her makeup trying to match what she looked like from my memory. Finally, I walked over to her dresser and looked at the picture she had there. Her picture stared back at me. She would be horrified if she could really see what I was doing. But I looked at her in her picture imagining it was a mirror. Then went to her full-length mirror and turned it away not wanting to look and used her picture instead as my witness. So I walked to her bed and removed the contents of her bag and laid it all out. It was then that I knew everything she wore on her wedding day. Under her wedding dress on her wedding day she had worn a white satin and lace Merry Widow/bustier to tighten her waist and enhance her feminine figure and support her breasts. She wore satin and lace bridal panties and a darling lacy garter belt on her hips to hold up her lace top stockings that I had only gotten a peek of at her garter toss. In front of her picture staring back at me I put her lacy bridal bustier around my body and tightened it. I carefully slipped on her bridal panties which felt so taboo to be doing. I fastened her white lacy garter belt around my waist and then slipped her lace top stockings on my legs and clipped the garter belt to them to hold them up. The feeling was an incredible mix of emotion. I was living a dream I had had for so long, but at the same time I was betraying the trust my sister had in me. It was so personal and so intimate. She was wearing the very same things not 24 hours before. As her picture looked on as my mirror, I slipped on heels and I walked over to her closet to become the bride I had always dreamed of becoming. I slipped into her beautiful white wedding dress and zipped it up. The feeling and its weight on my body was an incredible feeling. Her gown spread out before me and I could still smell her as her perfume from the day before was still on her dress. Her scent was still there and now it was me. It was as if I had become her. The dress was a tight fit and certainly didn't fit my body as well as it did hers. After all, the dress was tailored to fit her feminine body perfectly. But I was excited all the same. I dare say that it was so much more emotional and personal for me to be in her lacy bridal lingerie and soft satin wedding dress than she ever felt. As a finishing touch, I took her veil from the bag and fixed it to my hair, making sure the tiara was as straight as possible. I slipped the bridal veil over my face and turned to see her picture looking back at me through the mist created by the veil. As I stood in her very own bedroom in her intimate lingerie and beautiful wedding dress, I knew I had done the ultimate in betrayal to my sweet innocent sister. But it was everything I had ever wanted. Her picture was a mirror no more. It was time for a real mirror. I approached her full-length mirror in her bedroom. As I approached, so many thoughts were going through my mind. I was taking steps across my sister's bedroom as a bride in her gown. The wedding dress flowed around me with each step. Had my sister taken the very same walk to the mirror after putting on the very same wedding dress? Did she gaze at herself and see herself as a lovely bride in white like I did? What would she say if she ever knew the dark secret I had just begun? With each step I took, I could hear her dress move with me and feel her garter belt tug on the white lace top bridal stockings I had seen under her dress the day before. My sister had worn the very same wedding dress and bridal lingerie and walked the full length of the church aisle just the day before, and I hated her for it. Now it was me, and I could feel just as she did. Though she had been first, much to my disappointment, now it was my turn to be the beautiful bride. I was her. As her picture stared on at what I had done, I walked to her full-length mirror and turned it toward me. I could see in the misty view caused by the veil this beautiful bride in a white, pretty dress in front of me. It was the pretty dress I had felt on my older sister's body when I danced with her. I felt its softness on me just as I had felt its softness on her body. I closed my eyes and remembered how it felt on her when I held her. Then I ran my hands up and down my body, feeling that very same dress once more. But this time I felt more. This time I knew what the bride was wearing under her wedding dress as well. I opened my eyes, stared into the mirror, and lifted her veil. I was stunned as I looked into a mirror my sister has looked into many times before. There she was! This beautiful bride in her pretty white lace and satin wedding dress was looking right back at me. Her dress was so lovely. I turned to my sister's picture and gave her a kiss. Miles away, my sister didn't know. There was a bride admiring herself in her bedroom in her wedding dress once more. She had no idea she had a secret sister. And she could never know what I had done to betray her ultimate trust. My dream of being a bride in her pretty wedding dress was there before me. As I looked at the girl in the mirror, fascinated by her lovely dress, I pulled her dress up slowly, remembering how I had caught a glimpse under my sister's wedding dress as she pulled it up for her garter toss. The same garter was there. It was me doing it. Same garter, same lace tops, same dress, but now I knew so much more than I did the day before. But I decided to go further. Where my sister had stopped pulling up her dress, I went further. I watched the lovely bride in the mirror pull up her wedding dress and past all her feminine lace and satin to prove that even though it was the same dress and bridal lingerie from the day before, the bride in the mirror who looked like the princess from yesterday really wasn't my sister.